My name is Edie, and I was 22 when my world collapsed. I returned from my sophomore year of college, expecting warm hugs and home-cooked meals. Instead, I found a sold sign, staked in our front lawn, and cardboard boxes containing my life stacked on the driveway. My calls were met with my mother's cold voice. "Handle it yourself." I cut all contact that day. 2 years and 199 panic calls later, I finally understood what family truly means. Let me know where you're watching from in the comments, and hit that subscribe button to join me on this journey of betrayal and rebuilding. Growing up in our suburban Westfield home life seemed normal on the surface. My parents, Harold and Grace Peterson, provided a financially comfortable middle-class existence. Dad worked as a financial advisor at a regional firm, while Mom managed a real estate office. From the outside, we appeared to be the quintessential American family house, with a white picket fence family dinners and vacation photos proudly displayed in matching frames. But beneath that polished exterior lay a household governed by rigid expectations. From kindergarten, perfect grades weren't celebrated, they were expected. My parents never attended my school performances unless I had a solo part. Second place in the science fair earned me a lecture about trying harder next time rather than congratulations. Every achievement was merely a stepping stone to the next expectation. Physical affection became increasingly rare as I grew older. By middle school, hugs had been replaced with approving nods. Conversations revolved around academic performance and college preparation rather than my thoughts, feelings, or dreams. The emotional gap between us widened into a canyon I didn't know how to cross. Despite this emotional distance, I excelled academically. Straight A's throughout high school. President of the debate team. Editor of the school newspaper. Each accomplishment carefully chosen to build the perfect college application. The day I received my full scholarship to Westmore University for architecture was the last time I saw genuine pride in my parents' eyes. Architecture wasn't a random choice. I'd been sketching building designs since I was 8, imagining spaces where people would feel safe, comfortable, and connected. My dream was to someday design community centers for underprivileged neighborhoods, NF, places that could transform lives and foster belonging. This passion sustained me through the emotional coldness at home. My bedroom was my sanctuary, the only space truly mine in that house. Pale blue walls covered with my architectural sketches and photographs. Bookshelves crammed with architecture books I'd saved for years to buy. A special corner shelf held treasures from my grandmother before she passed when I was 12. Her vintage camera, a hand-knitted blanket, and a jewelry box, containing the only family heirlooms I possessed. Grandma Margaret had been my emotional lifeline. During summer visits, she taught me that love should be unconditional. "Your worth isn't in your achievements, Edie," she would say, stroking my hair while we baked cookies together. "It's in your heart." After she died, that jewelry box, containing her simple pearl necklace, became my most precious possession. The summer before college, I worked double shifts at a local coffee shop, saving every penny for textbooks and expenses not covered by my scholarship. My parents made it clear that while tuition might be covered, I would need to handle everything else. Building independence, they called it. I was both terrified and exhilarated about leaving home. My first year at Westmore University felt like breathing freely for the first time. My roommate Mia, an international student from Brazil studying journalism, became my first true friend. She introduced me to Jordan, a computer science major with a wicked sense of humor who lived down the hall. For the first time, I experienced friendship without conditions. People who liked me for simply being Edie, not for my accomplishments. That freshman year transformed me. I joined the University Architectural Society, volunteered at a local community center, and even went on my first real date. My design projects received praise from professors who saw genuine potential in my work. One professor, Dr. Amelia Torres, took special interest in my community-focused designs and became something of a mentor. Communication with my parents dwindled to brief weekly phone calls that followed a predictable script. How were my grades? Was I maintaining my scholarship? Had I found an internship yet? I answered their questions dutifully, but shared little about my new friendships or growing confidence. Something told me they wouldn't understand or value these developments. As summer approached, a strange anxiety began to build. Despite the emotional distance, I still considered my parents' house home and assumed I would return there between semesters. When I mentioned summer plans during our last phone call, my mother seemed distracted, simply saying, "We'll figure it out when you get here." Looking back, I should have recognized the warning in her vague response, but I was focused on finals and end-of-year projects. The semester ended triumphantly. I aced my final presentations, secured a spot on the dean's list, and even won a department award for my community center design. Mia and Jordan threw a small celebration in our dorm room the night before everyone departed for summer break. We took photos, exchanged summer contact information, and promised to text regularly. "You sure you'll be okay going home?" Mia asked while helping me pack. "You never talk about your parents with any real excitement." I shrugged, folding my clothes into a suitcase. "It's just 3 months. I'll focus on finding a summer job and working on my portfolio. Besides, I have my room there, my books, my designs, my space." Jordan gave me a tight hug before leaving. "Call us if you need anything. Seriously, anything at all." I nodded, not knowing how prophetic their concern would prove to be. As I locked my dorm room that final morning, I felt a mix of accomplishment and apprehension. The academic year had been transformative, but something about returning home felt like stepping backward. Still, I had my sanctuary waiting for me, my blue room with my books and memories, or so I thought. The bus ride home stretched for 6 hours. I watched through the window as the landscape transformed from the bustling college town to familiar suburbs. Despite my anxiety, a part of me looked forward to sleeping in my own bed, surrounded by my books and design sketches. I sent a quick text to my parents' bus, arriving at 4:30. "See you soon." No response came, but I assumed they were busy at work. As the bus approached my stop, I gathered my luggage, one large suitcase containing clothes and necessities, my laptop bag, and a portfolio case holding my best architectural drawings from the semester. Everything else I owned remained in my bedroom at home. The early June heat hit me as I stepped off the air-conditioned bus, sweat immediately beading on my forehead as I began the 15-minute walk to our neighborhood. Something felt off as I turned onto our street. From a distance, our 2-story colonial looked different somehow. Drawing closer, my steps slowed as confusion set in. A large red and white sign stood prominently in the front yard, "Sold," in bold letters with a real estate company logo underneath. Not my mother's company, but their main competitor. My heart began to race as I approached the driveway. Stacked near the garage were at least a dozen cardboard boxes of varying sizes, some looking hastily taped shut, others appearing water-damaged from recent rain. With trembling hands, I opened the nearest box to find my books haphazardly piled inside, many with bent pages and damaged covers. "They've been sitting there for 3 days now," called a voice from next door. Mrs. Agnes Wright, our 70-year-old neighbor, stood on her porch looking at me with undisguised pity. "I tried calling your parents when they started putting your things out, but they said you were aware of the situation. Were you not told, dear?" I couldn't respond, shock, rendering me speechless as I frantically pulled out my phone. My mother's number rang 4 times before connecting. "Hello, Edith." Her voice carried the same professionally detached tone she used with difficult clients. "Mom, what's happening? There's a sold sign in the yard and my stuff is in boxes on the driveway." My voice cracked with panic and confusion. "Yes, we sold the house. Your father and I have relocated to Florida. We discussed this months ago." Her words hit like physical blows. They had never mentioned moving, not once during our weekly calls. "What? When did you? Where am I supposed to go?" The reality of my situation was beginning to sink in panic, rising in my throat. "You're an adult now, Edith. You have a scholarship. You need to handle your own arrangements." The clinical detachment in her voice was worse than any anger would have been. "But all my things. My books, Grandma's jewelry box. Where am I supposed to live for the summer? My dorm is closed." Tears streamed down my face as I paced beside the boxes, drawing concerned glances from passing neighbors. "We kept what was important. The rest is there for you to sort through. You should be thankful we didn't just donate everything. This is part of growing up." My mother's voice held no sympathy, no recognition of the cruelty of their actions. "Growing up, you threw me out without warning. You didn't even tell me you were moving." I was shouting now, not caring who heard. "Handle it, Edith. You've always prided yourself on your independence. Now's your chance to prove it." The line went dead before I could respond. I stood frozen, phone still pressed to my ear, unable to process what had just happened. The perfect academic year I'd completed, all my achievements, meant nothing in that moment. I was homeless, with no warning and no preparation. Mrs. Agnes approached cautiously, concern etched on her weathered face. "Edie, dear, is everything all right?" The kindness in her voice broke the dam. I collapsed onto the nearest box, sobbing uncontrollably, as I tried to explain between gasps what little I understood of my situation. "Mrs." Agnes listened, her expression shifting from concern to outrage. "You'll stay with me tonight," she declared firmly. "We'll figure something out tomorrow, but you're not sleeping on the street. Harold and Grace should be ashamed of themselves." That evening, I systematically went through each box, creating an inventory of what remained of my possessions. Much was missing. My grandmother's jewelry box was nowhere to be found, nor were my architectural reference books, the expensive ones I'd saved for years to purchase. My winter clothes were absent, as were most of my shoes. What remained seemed randomly chosen, as though they'd packed in haste without concern for what I might need. I tried calling my father next, hoping for some explanation or apology. His phone went straight to voicemail. I tried my mother again, but she didn't answer. With shaking hands, I sent a text message. "How could you do this to me? Where is Grandma's jewelry box? Where are my winter clothes and architecture books?" The response came an hour later. "We kept some things for sentimental reasons. The books were donated to the library. Your winter clothes went to charity. You can buy new ones with your summer job money." The casual disposal of my most precious possessions was the final betrayal. I sent one last message: "Don't contact me again, ever." Then I blocked both their numbers. That night, I slept on Mrs. Agnes's fold-out couch, too shocked to even cry anymore. Around midnight, a thunderstorm rolled through the neighborhood. From the window, I watched rain soak into the cardboard boxes containing what remained of my childhood and adolescence. Like my parents' love, those boxes proved inadequate protection against the elements. Morning brought clarity, if not comfort. Mrs. Agnes made coffee and toast, treating me with a gentle kindness that only highlighted the cruelty of my parents' actions. Over breakfast, she made some calls to friends, searching for temporary housing options. "My niece's daughter stayed at a student boarding house last summer," she explained. "It's not fancy, but it's cheap, and they might have space available. By afternoon, I had secured the last available room in a rundown Victorian house, converted into student housing 6 blocks from my old home. The rent would consume most of my savings within weeks. My new room was barely larger than a closet with peeling wallpaper and a mattress that sagged in the middle. My roommate Stephanie was a pharmacy student who made it immediately clear she preferred solitude and silence. "I work nights at the hospital and sleep days," she explained curtly. "So keep the noise down during daylight hours." Mrs. Agnes helped me salvage what we could from the rain-damaged boxes. Many of my books were beyond repair, pages stuck together or covers warped beyond recognition. My sketches and designs had fared worst of all. Years of work reduced to soggy, smeared paper. I photographed what remained legible before reluctantly discarding the originals. With shelter secured but rapidly diminishing funds, my next priority was finding work. The summer job market was already saturated with students who'd planned ahead. After 3 days of rejection, I managed to secure 3 part-time positions, morning shifts at a coffee shop, evening hours at a grocery store, and weekend babysitting for a family with 3 young children. My schedule became brutal, up at 4:30 for the 5 a.m. coffee shop shift a few hours in the afternoon to search for more stable housing and attempt to salvage my belongings. Then 6 hours at the grocery store before collapsing into bed. Weekends were consumed with babysitting, leaving no time for rest or reflection. Despite working nearly 70 hours weekly, I was barely covering expenses. The summer architectural internship I'd hoped for remained an impossible dream. 2 weeks into this exhausting routine, I received an unexpected call from my mother's younger sister, Catherine. Unlike my mother, Aunt Catherine had always shown genuine interest in my life, though geographic distance and my parents' control had limited our relationship. "Edie, I just found out what happened," she began, her voice tight with anger. "I'm so sorry. If I'd known, I would have offered you our guest room immediately." "How did you find out?" I asked, too tired to feel much beyond curiosity. "Your mother mentioned it casually during our monthly call, as if abandoning you was completely normal. She said you were being dramatic about the situation." Catherine's disgust was evident. "I need you to know this wasn't a sudden decision. They've been planning this move for months." The confirmation of premeditation stung despite my exhaustion. "Did they say why?" Catherine hesitated. "They used the money from selling your house to buy investment properties in Florida. Apparently they've been wanting to get into real estate development but needed capital." She paused. "Edie, they made it clear they don't intend to support you financially anymore. They said college students should be self-sufficient." The conversation confirmed my worst suspicions, but provided no comfort. Catherine offered financial help, which pride made me reluctantly decline. She insisted on sending a small amount anyway, which arrived just in time to cover an unexpected medical bill when I developed bronchitis from exhaustion and poor nutrition. As June turned to July, my physical and mental health deteriorated rapidly. Constant work and insufficient sleep left me perpetually exhausted. Proper meals became a luxury. I couldn't afford my diet, consisting mainly of discounted groceries from my store and leftover pastries from the coffee shop. Weight dropped from my already slender frame, clothes hanging loosely from my shoulders. Sleep, when it came, was haunted by anxiety dreams. I would wake gasping, convinced I was being forced from my bed. Dark thoughts began to intrude during waking hours. What was the point of struggling so hard just to survive? The academic success I'd achieved seemed meaningless now, overshadowed by basic survival concerns. My friendship with Mia and Jordan suffered as well. Initially, I'd shared abbreviated versions of my situation, downplaying the severity to avoid worrying them. As weeks passed, I stopped responding to their messages altogether, unable to bridge the gap between their carefree summer experiences and my desperate reality. They continued reaching out, but I couldn't find words to explain my circumstances without breaking down. By mid-July, the summer session at Westmore had begun, and I attempted to take one class to maintain academic progress. The effort proved disastrous. Unable to focus during lectures, I watched my perfect GPA slip away as I failed the midterm exam. My professor, concerned by my dramatic change from the previous semester, suggested I withdraw from the course rather than risk academic probation. That failure triggered my first panic attack, gasping for breath in the bathroom stall, after class convinced I was dying as my chest constricted painfully. The campus health center diagnosed acute anxiety and recommended counseling I couldn't afford and had no time to attend. The final blow came when I received an email from the scholarship committee requesting a meeting about my academic concerns. Without maintaining a minimum GPA, my full scholarship was in jeopardy. The carefully constructed future I'd worked toward for years was crumbling, and I had no safety net to catch me. One evening, while shelving products at the grocery store, I glimpsed a woman who resembled my mother. The momentary sighting sent me spiraling into another panic attack, this time in full view of customers and coworkers. My manager sent me home early, with a warning about bringing personal problems to work. That night, in my tiny, stifling room, I curled into a ball on my sagging mattress and allowed myself to fully feel the abandonment. My parents hadn't just left me without a home. They had systematically dismantled every support I might have relied on, taking even the mementos that connected me to my grandmother's love. The betrayal felt total and irreversible. For the first time, I faced the possibility that I might not survive this. Not physically, perhaps, but the person I had been, ambitious, confident, driven, was disappearing beneath the weight of simply existing day to day. Without intervention, I wasn't sure who would remain. August arrived with sweltering heat and mounting financial pressure. My scholarship remained in jeopardy, and the fall semester loomed just weeks away. The university bursar's office sent increasingly urgent emails about outstanding fees not covered by my scholarship, housing deposits, activity fees, textbook costs. Each notification heightened my anxiety, but I had no resources to address them. Credit card debt accumulated rapidly as I charged essential expenses I couldn't cover with my dwindling income. The interest rates were predatory, designed to trap desperate people exactly like me. Each minimum payment I scraped together barely touched the principal balance. Financial anxiety became a constant companion, waking with me each morning and following me to each exhausting job. My living situation deteriorated further when Stephanie announced she was moving in with her boyfriend, leaving me responsible for the full rent or finding a new roommate immediately. No one responded to my hastily posted advertisements. The landlord, unsympathetic to my situation, gave me 10 days to either pay the full amount or vacate. In desperation, I attempted one final conversation with my parents. After weeks of silence, I unblocked their numbers and called my father, first hoping he might show more compassion than my mother had. "Edith." His voice was stiff, formal. "I assume you're calling about money." "Dad, I'm about to lose my scholarship and my housing. I can't work any more hours than I already am. I need help." Swallowing my pride felt like choking on glass, but I had no alternatives. "Your mother and I discussed this. We believe you're experiencing necessary growing pains. Real life isn't handed to you. You have to earn your way." He sounded as if he was reciting from a parenting book, detached from the reality of my circumstances. "Growing pains. I'm working 3 jobs and can barely feed myself. You left me homeless without warning." My voice rose with each word, anger temporarily overcoming exhaustion. That attitude is exactly the problem. You've always had an inflated sense of entitlement. We provided for you for 18 years. Other parents don't support their children through college at all. You didn't just stop supporting me. You actively sabotaged me. You threw away my possessions, stole family heirlooms that weren't even yours to take, and didn't even have the decency to warn me. I wouldn't have a home to return to. His voice hardened. Those heirlooms belong to our family, not just to you. Your grandmother would have wanted us to have them too. As for warning you, perhaps, if you'd called more often during the semester, instead of getting caught up in your college life, you would have known our plans. The breathtaking unfairness of his statement stunned me into momentary silence. They had deliberately withheld information about selling our home, then blamed me for not somehow intuiting their plans. You're ungrateful, Edith. We gave you everything, and now you're acting like a victim because we expect adult behavior from you. Something inside me shattered with those words, the last remnant of hope that my parents might acknowledge their cruelty or offer even minimal assistance. I never want to speak to either of you again, I said, my voice suddenly calm. You haven't given me everything. You've taught me that family means nothing, that love is conditional, that I can't trust the people who should protect me most. Congratulations on that lesson. It's the last one you'll ever teach me. I ended the call and blocked their numbers again, this time with finality rather than reactive anger. The severance felt permanent, a cauterizing of an infected wound, painful but necessary for survival. The next morning, the landlord served an eviction notice. I had 48 hours to vacate the premises. With nowhere to go, and most of my possessions already lost, I packed my few remaining clothes and essentials into my backpack. The architecture textbooks I'd managed to salvage were too heavy to carry, so I left them behind, along with my damaged portfolio. That night, an unseasonable thunderstorm swept through the region. Without shelter, I huddled in the covered entryway of the public library, soaked and shivering as lightning cracked overhead. Hours passed in miserable discomfort, hunger gnawing at my stomach, exhaustion pulling at my consciousness. By dawn, fever burned through me, my clothes still damp against clammy skin. I attempted to walk to my morning coffee shop shift, but made it only 2 blocks before collapsing on a bench, too dizzy to continue. A passerby called an ambulance, despite my weak protests about medical costs. The hospital emergency room was blindingly bright after the gray morning. Doctors diagnosed severe dehydration, malnutrition, and pneumonia. The medical staff exchanged concerned glances when I admitted I had no permanent address and no family to contact. Your body is shutting down, the doctor explained bluntly. Extreme stress, insufficient nutrition, and inadequate rest have compromised your immune system. You need to be admitted. I laughed hollowly. I can't afford this visit, let alone a hospital stay. A hospital social worker was called. Through feverish haze, I explained my situation. The abandonment lost scholarship eviction, and jobs I could no longer physically perform. She took notes with increasing concern, occasionally asking clarifying questions about my age and student status. There are resources available for students in crisis, she explained. Let me make some calls to your university. Semi-conscious with fever, I had little choice but to agree. As antibiotics flowed through an IV into my arm, I surrendered to complete exhaustion, too depleted to fight any longer. For the first time since discovering the sold sign 2 months earlier, I allowed myself to fully release control, uncertain whether anything would remain when I awakened. I awoke to find Professor Amelia Torres sitting beside my hospital bed, her familiar face, a surreal sight in the clinical setting. For a moment, I thought the fever had induced hallucinations. "Welcome back," she said softly. "You've been asleep for nearly 20 hours." Confusion clouded my thoughts as I struggled to understand her presence. "Professor Torres, how did you?" "The hospital contacted student services when you were admitted. When they heard your name, they called me." She leaned forward, concern evident in her eyes. "Edie, why didn't you reach out? The department would have helped." Shame and pride had prevented me from seeking help, I realized. Even at my lowest point, I'd been unable to admit the depth of my struggles, especially to professors I respected. I didn't want anyone to know I whispered throat raw from coughing. I thought I could handle it myself. Professor Torres shook her head gently. "No one handles homelessness and abandonment themselves, especially not at 22. That's not independence, it's isolation." Over the next hour, as my mind cleared, she outlined a path forward that seemed impossible just days earlier. The architecture department had a research assistant position available immediately, not prestigious, but offering a small stipend and, crucially, access to graduate student housing during the summer. "It's a single room in a shared apartment," she explained. "Basic, but clean and secure. The stipend won't make you rich, but combined with campus meal assistance, you won't go hungry." Tears welled in my eyes, the kindness almost more painful than the previous hardships. "Why would you do this for me?" "Because your talent is exceptional and your situation is unjust." Her directness was refreshing after months of platitudes. "More importantly, because that's what a community does, supports its members through crisis." That concept, community as safety net, was revolutionary to me after years of enforced self-reliance. The architecture department arranged for my hospital bills to be covered through an emergency student health fund. The financial aid office helped restructure my scholarship, allowing a probationary semester to restore my GPA without losing funding. Physical recovery came gradually. The hospital discharged me after 3 days with prescriptions and strict instructions to rest. My new graduate housing room was sparse, but clean with a real bed and functioning shower. For the first week, I did little beyond sleep and eat regular meals at the nearly empty summer dining hall, my body, reclaiming lost resources. Professor Torres introduced me to Dr. Lydia Winters, the University Counseling Center director, who specialized in family estrangement. Our twice-weekly sessions initially focused on immediate stabilization, managing panic attacks, establishing sleep routines, processing the acute trauma of abandonment. "What your parents did wasn't just unkind," Dr. Winters explained during one session. "It was a form of psychological abuse. The suddenness was intentionally destabilizing." But why would they do that? What purpose did it serve? This question had haunted me for months. "Control," she replied, simply. "By keeping you in a state of crisis, they maintained power even while physically absent. They're likely expecting you to eventually break down and beg for help on their terms." The observation resonated painfully. My parents had always valued control above emotional connection. Their final act had been designed to reinforce my dependence, not foster independence as they'd claimed. As July faded into August, my research assistant duties provided structure and purpose. The work was straightforward: organizing architectural archives, digitizing old blueprints, compiling research bibliographies. Though not creatively challenging, it reconnected me to the field I loved and provided interaction with graduate students and faculty who treated me as a valued colleague. Physical health improvements allowed me to finally respond to Mia and Jordan's increasingly worried messages. Their immediate, unconditional support overwhelmed me. They arranged a video call where I finally shared the full story, no longer hiding the severity of what had happened. I'm coming back early, Mia declared firmly. My flight was scheduled for next week anyway. I'll just change it. And I'm helping you move your stuff to the dorms as soon as they open, Jordan added. No arguments. Their matter-of-fact assistance, offered without pity or judgment, began healing something fundamental in my understanding of relationships. People could care without ulterior motives. Support didn't always come with invisible strings attached. Through the university's student support services, I connected with others who had experienced family estrangement. Our weekly group sessions revealed I wasn't alone. Other students had faced similar abandonment for reasons ranging from sexual orientation to religious differences to simple family dysfunction. Their stories both broke my heart and strengthened my resolve. Sarah, a nursing student, disowned for leaving her parents' religious community, became a particular friend and guide. 3 years into her estrangement, she had built a fulfilling life without family support. The first year is the hardest, she told me over coffee. You're grieving people who are still alive, but eventually you build a chosen family that loves you for who you actually are, not who they demand you be. This concept of chosen family became my focus as summer ended and fall semester approached. With stable housing secured in the reopened dormitories and my scholarship provisionally reinstated, I could finally look beyond immediate survival. Professor Torres helped me develop a more manageable course load for fall, emphasizing quality over quantity to rebuild my academic standing. My first architecture project of the semester became deeply personal, designing transitional housing for young adults experiencing housing insecurity. Design from your lived experience, Professor Torres encouraged. What would have made a difference for you this summer? The resulting project, a modular community with shared resources, private sleeping spaces, and built-in support services, received the highest marks of my academic career. More importantly, it reconnected me to the purpose that had initially drawn me to architecture, creating spaces that foster security and belonging. By mid-semester, I had re-established daily routines, rebuilt friendships, and reconnected with my academic goals. The panic attacks diminished, though occasional nightmares persisted. My single-minded focus on survival expanded to include small pleasures again, sketching for enjoyment, not just assignment, movie nights with friends, even occasional laughter. Dr. Winters helped me understand that recovery wasn't linear. Some days still brought overwhelming grief for the family relationship I had lost. Not the actual relationship which had been conditional and controlling, but the idealized family I had always longed for. Accepting that my parents would never be those people was an ongoing process measured in small victories rather than complete resolution. Healing doesn't mean forgetting, or even necessarily forgiving, she explained. It means the pain no longer controls your daily choices. It means building a life where that relationship status doesn't define your worth. Gradually, painfully, I began constructing that life. One independent decision, one healthy relationship, one academic achievement at a time. The 2 years following that traumatic summer transformed me in ways I could never have anticipated. External changes were easily measurable. I graduated with honors despite that difficult semester, secured a position with Horizon Architectural Group, specializing in community-focused design, and rented my first real apartment in Krabel, a converted warehouse downtown. My portfolio expanded with meaningful projects, including a youth center for an underserved neighborhood that won recognition from the City Planning Commission. The internal changes proved more profound. Independence, once forced upon me as punishment, became a source of quiet pride. Each rent payment, made with my own earnings, each professional challenge navigated successfully, each holiday celebrated with chosen family rather than biological relatives, built confidence that couldn't be undermined by my parents' absence. My apartment, though small, became the sanctuary I'd once sought in my childhood bedroom. Industrial windows flooded the space with natural light, illuminating walls covered with architectural drawings and photographs of meaningful moments. Graduation with Mia and Jordan flanking me in cap and gown. The ribbon-cutting ceremony for the youth center. Weekend hiking trips with my expanding circle of friends. Each image represented connection freely given, not contingent on performance or compliance. Financial stability came gradually. Entry-level architectural work paid modestly, but careful budgeting allowed small luxuries after basic needs were met. I developed systems for everything: emergency savings, retirement contributions, insurance coverage, creating the security my parents had abruptly removed. The process was tedious, but empowering each financial decision, strengthening my self-reliance. Romance entered my life unexpectedly through a community garden project where I volunteered monthly. Thomas, an environmental engineer with a passion for sustainable urban spaces, approached me with questions about incorporating garden structures into apartment complexes. Our professional conversation evolved into coffee, then dinner, then a relationship built on mutual respect and transparent communication. "Tell me about your family," he asked during our third date. "I don't have contact with my biological family," I replied, simply waiting for the awkward questions that usually followed such statements. Instead, he nodded thoughtfully. "Family is who shows up for you, not just who shares your DNA. I'd like to hear that story whenever you're ready to share it, but no pressure." His response reflected the emotional intelligence that would later make him an invaluable partner. When I eventually shared the full story of abandonment, he listened without judgment, asked thoughtful questions, and never pushed for reconciliation when I expressed contentment with my estrangement. "Some broken things shouldn't be glued back together," he observed. "Sometimes the breaking creates space for something healthier to grow." As my professional reputation grew, so did my financial security. The promotion to junior project manager came with a substantial salary increase, allowing me to finally address the lingering debt from that desperate summer. Each paid-off credit card represented another link in the chain of dependence severed. By the second anniversary of the day, I found my belongings in rain-soaked boxes. I was debt-free, with growing savings and a clear career trajectory. That milestone date passed without acknowledgement until Thomas mentioned it casually over dinner. "It's been exactly 2 years today, hasn't it?" I paused, fork midair. "How did you remember that?" "It's important to you, even if you don't mark it officially." He squeezed my hand gently. "I'm proud of you, you know. Most people wouldn't have rebuilt so completely from that starting point." His recognition triggered unexpected emotion. I had been so focused on moving forward that I'd rarely acknowledged the distance already traveled. 2 years earlier, I had been hospitalized, homeless, and hopeless. Now I stood on solid ground entirely of my own creation. The next morning, my phone displayed a notification I initially didn't comprehend. 199 missed calls from the same number over the past 2 years. My mother's number still blocked, but persistently attempting contact. Each call had gone directly to voicemail without alerting me, the count silently increasing while I rebuilt my life. Curiosity overcame caution. I logged into my voicemail system and discovered dozens of messages, beginning with angry demands shortly after I blocked their numbers, evolving into increasingly desperate pleas as months passed. The most recent, from just days earlier, contained something I'd never heard in my mother's voice before: genuine fear. "Edith, please. Your father's had a stroke. We need you to call us. Things are difficult here. Please." The weakness in her voice, so different from her usual controlled tone, gave me pause. A quick internet search confirmed the truth. My father had indeed suffered a major stroke 3 weeks earlier. Local news coverage of a community fundraiser mentioned mounting medical bills and potential foreclosure for the Peterson family. My Aunt Catherine called that same afternoon, unaware I'd discovered the news independently. "I know you're still angry and you have every right to be," she began cautiously. "But I thought you should know what's happening." The story she shared revealed how dramatically my parents' circumstances had changed. Their Florida real estate investments had failed catastrophically during an economic downturn. Properties purchased at inflated prices now stood vacant and unsellable, draining their savings through mortgage payments and property taxes. "They lost almost everything even before Harold's stroke," Catherine explained. "Grace had to return to real estate sales, but the market there is oversaturated. They were already struggling, and now with medical bills." "Why are you telling me this?" I asked, genuinely uncertain what response she expected. "I'm not suggesting you should help them financially," she clarified quickly. "God knows they don't deserve that after what they did. I just thought. Maybe this changes how you feel about communication." Grace seems genuinely remorseful, though that might be situational rather than genuine growth. The information created complicated emotions I hadn't anticipated. Not satisfaction at their misfortune, I wasn't wired for schadenfreude, but confusion about my own responsibilities in this new dynamic. The parents who had abandoned me now faced abandonment by the financial system they had prioritized over family bonds. That evening, I discussed the situation with Thomas and my closest friends during our weekly dinner gathering. Their perspectives varied, but shared a common thread: FD1. This decision belonged entirely to me, with no right answer dictated by social obligation or conventional morality. "Would contact help your healing or hinder it?" Mia asked practically. "That's the only question that matters." Jordan was more direct. "They're essentially strangers who once caused you significant harm. Would you rush to help strangers who hurt you just because they're now suffering?" Dr. Winters, during our now monthly check-in session, provided the most clarifying framework. Consider what you need from any potential contact, not what they need, what you need. Closure, acknowledgement of harm. Nothing at all. Your needs are valid regardless of their current circumstances. After days of reflection, I realized I did want something. Not reconciliation, but resolution. The opportunity to speak my truth directly without the desperate circumstances that had colored our last interaction. To look them in the eyes as the successful adult I had become, despite not because of their actions. With that clarity, I made a decision that would shape the next phase of my journey, one based on my needs rather than their expectations or conventional family obligations. The Florida airport buzzed with vacation energy, families reuniting, tourists heading to beaches and theme parks, all existing in stark contrast to my solemn purpose. I had chosen to fly rather than drive, limiting my time in the state to exactly 48 hours, enough to accomplish what I needed without unnecessary extended contact. The rental car's navigation guided me through unfamiliar streets to a modest medical rehabilitation facility on the outskirts of Jacksonville. Nothing about the nondescript building suggested the significance of what waited inside. My first face-to-face encounter with my parents in over 2 years. My mother sat alone in the waiting area, her appearance shocking in its transformation. The perfectly coiffed, immaculately dressed real estate professional had been replaced by someone who looked a decade older than her actual age. Gray roots showed beneath poorly maintained hair dye, and her clothes hung loosely on a frame that had lost considerable weight. She didn't notice me immediately, giving me moments to compose myself before approaching. "Grace," I said formally, using her first name deliberately. Her head snapped up, eyes widening in disbelief. Edith, you came. She half rose, arms extending for an embrace I didn't reciprocate. Awkwardly, she settled back into her chair. I'm here to see Harold, I stated, maintaining emotional distance through formality. And to speak with both of you directly. Nothing more. Something flickered across her face. Disappointment, perhaps, or recognition of boundaries she hadn't anticipated. He's in physical therapy now, they said 20 more minutes. She gestured to the chair beside her. Will you sit? I chose a seat opposite, rather than adjacent, maintaining physical space that reflected emotional reality. I understand Harold had a severe stroke. She nodded, eyes downcast. The right side of his body was paralyzed. Speech affected, too. He's improving with therapy, but... She trailed off, twisting her wedding band anxiously. The medical bills are overwhelming. Insurance covered the initial hospitalization, but not the ongoing care. We're about to lose the condo. I didn't respond to the implied request for assistance. How long has he been here? 6 weeks. They're discharging him next week, regardless of progress. We can't afford more. Her voice cracked slightly. Edith, I know we have no right to ask anything of you, but seeing you, just having you here, means more than you can know. I'm not here for reconciliation, I stated clearly. I'm here because I needed to say certain things directly, not through voicemails or intermediaries. I needed you to see who I've become despite what you did, not because of it. Before she could respond, a nurse wheeled my father into the waiting area. The strong, intimidating financial advisor who had dominated my childhood was unrecognizable in this slumped figure. The stroke had affected the left side of his face, drooping his features into a permanent half-grimace. His right arm lay useless in his lap. His eyes widened upon seeing me, and he attempted to speak. Edie. The name emerged, slurred but unmistakable. Tears immediately formed in his eyes. Despite my emotional armor, the sight affected me. Not enough to erase the past, but enough to acknowledge his humanity separate from his actions. Hello, Harold. The nurse helped transfer him to a regular chair, before departing, leaving the three of us in a triangle of complicated history. No one spoke for several moments, the weight of unaddressed harm filling the space between us. Perhaps we should go somewhere more private, my mother suggested, clearly uncomfortable with potential public witnesses to our family dysfunction. No, I replied firmly. I prefer neutral territory. What I have to say won't take long. I straightened my shoulders, centering myself in the strength I'd built over 2 years of recovery and growth. I want to be absolutely clear about why I'm here. I didn't come out of family obligation or forgiveness. I came because I needed to complete this chapter properly before moving forward with my life. My father attempted to interject, struggling with impaired speech, but I continued steadily. 2 years ago, you chose to abandon me without warning. You disposed of my possessions, including irreplaceable family heirlooms. You left me homeless during a vulnerable transition period. Then you blamed me for not handling the crisis you deliberately created. The facts stated plainly, without emotional embellishment, landed with visible impact. When I needed help most desperately, you not only refused assistance, but actively sabotaged my stability. I nearly lost my scholarship, my health, and potentially my life because of your actions. My mother's face crumpled. We never meant for things to get that bad. We thought you would just figure things out. You were always so capable. I was 22, I replied evenly. Barely more than a child, despite your convenient reframing. And figuring things out shouldn't have included homelessness and hospitalization. My father struggled to form words, finally managing, Sorry. So sorry, Edie. The simple apology, likely the first he'd ever offered me momentarily, softened my resolve. But sentimentality wouldn't serve any of us now. I've built a life without your support, I continued. I graduated with honors. I have a successful career in architecture. I have meaningful relationships with people who value me for who I am, not what I achieve. I have financial stability. I created entirely myself. Pride straightened my mother's posture slightly. We always knew you were capable of great things. This isn't about capability. It's about basic human decency and parental responsibility. I kept my voice level despite rising emotion. Your current circumstances don't erase your actions or their consequences. I'm not here to rescue you financially or emotionally. My father's damaged face couldn't hide his disappointment. He had clearly expected, or hoped, for more. However, I continued after a measured pause. I am willing to help you navigate the available assistance programs, not with my personal funds, but with information. There are medical debt forgiveness programs, housing assistance options, and social services designed for situations like yours. Relief visibly washed over my mother's face, quickly replaced by confusion when I added, "This assistance comes with boundaries. I will provide information and limited guidance. I will not provide financial support. I will not pretend we are a normal family. I will not subject myself to further manipulation or guilt." "That's fair," my mother acknowledged quietly. "More than fair considering everything. I've compiled information on programs you qualify for." I removed a folder from my bag, placing it on the table between us. Application procedures, contact information, eligibility requirements, everything you need is documented. I've also included the contact information for a social worker specializing in elder care and medical debt. She's expecting your call. My father reached for the folder with his functioning hand clutching it like a lifeline. "Thank you," he managed. "This doesn't fix what happened," I stated clearly. "It doesn't restore trust or create a typical parent-child relationship. I'm doing this because I've healed enough that helping doesn't harm me further, not because you deserve assistance." My mother nodded, tears streaming unchecked down her face. "We destroyed something precious. I see that now. Your father sees it too." "Yes, you did," I agreed simply. "Some things once broken can't be repaired to their original state. Our relationship is one of those things. I'm not seeking revenge or punishment. I'm establishing truth as the foundation for whatever limited contact might exist moving forward." We spoke for another hour, establishing clear parameters for potential future communication. No financial entanglements, limited personal information sharing. Communication primarily through email rather than emotional phone calls. No expectations of holiday visits or typical family behaviors. Acknowledgement of harm rather than convenient forgetting. As I prepared to leave, my father gestured urgently for my attention. With visible effort, he formed the clearest sentence since our reunion. "Proud of you, not for helping, for surviving us." The statement, perhaps the most honest he'd ever offered, acknowledged the fundamental truth of our relationship. Their parenting hadn't prepared me for success. It had been something to overcome rather than build upon. I nodded once, accepting the admission without softening my boundaries. "I'll check in via email next week about the assistance applications. Nothing more for now." The drive back to my hotel brought unexpected peace rather than the emotional turmoil I'd anticipated. I had faced my greatest fear, confronting the people who had inflicted profound harm, and emerged intact. Their power over my emotional well-being had dissipated not through forgiveness, but through my own growth and clarified boundaries. Back in my normal life the following week, I shared the experience with my chosen family during dinner at Thomas's apartment. Their supportive questions and observations helped process the complex emotions the encounter had generated. "Do you regret going?" Mia asked, passing a bowl of pasta across the table. "No," I replied thoughtfully. "It confirmed what I've been working toward in therapy. They can't hurt me anymore unless I allow it. Their approval or disapproval has no power over my life." "That's the definition of true independence," Thomas observed, squeezing my hand gently. Over the subsequent months, I maintained the exact boundaries established during that brief visit. My parents received the assistance they needed through the programs I'd identified. Our limited email communication remained focused and practical rather than emotional. Neither reconciliation nor complete estrangement, but a carefully managed middle ground that protected my well-being while acknowledging our shared history. The experience solidified the most profound lesson of my journey. Family is defined by behavior, not biology. The people who had demonstrated unconditional support during my darkest moments, Professor Torres Missis, Agnes Mia, Jordan Thomas, and others who had entered my life since, constituted my true family. They had earned that designation through consistent care and respect, not through genetic connection. My architectural work evolved to reflect this understanding, focusing increasingly on creating spaces that fostered chosen communities. The youth center expanded to include transitional housing for young adults aging out of foster care or experiencing family rejection. Each project incorporated elements designed to facilitate connection and belonging among people without traditional family support. When painful memories occasionally surfaced, I no longer pushed them away or allowed them to overwhelm me. Instead, I acknowledged them as part of my history without allowing them to define my present or future. The abandoned girl with rain-soaked possessions existed within my story, but she was no longer my entire identity. The boxes left on the driveway that summer day had contained more than discarded belongings. They had held an unintended gift, the catalyst for building a life based on authentic connection rather than obligation, achievement, or fear. The home I had created within myself proved more secure than any physical structure my parents had provided or taken away. What was your most valuable possession that you lost in a difficult situation? Have you ever had to rebuild from scratch after a major loss or betrayal? Comment below to share your story. And if this resonated with you, please like and subscribe to support more stories of resilience and healing. Share with someone who might need to hear that family is about actions, not just DNA. Thank you for witnessing my journey from abandonment to strength. Remember, sometimes the things we think are endings turn out to be powerful new beginnings.